All right, so this is using query for June 15th, 2020, the last one of the quarter. We had talked to a couple of people who might join us, so we'll leave the phone lines open. But I thought in the meantime, I would sort of share the contents of a survey that I drafted and Rusty took a look at, which is based on some of the work we did interviewing folks in the open data space to learn about their problems. So this is a survey that we published and is live, and I'll include a link in the description. And we're using it to try and learn as much about which problems are the worst for the folks who are using query. We at Query purport to solve or be a part of a solution of a lot of different kinds of problems, and we want to use answers from the survey, but also conversations like it to kind of guide our work over the next few cycles and stuff. So I'll just read the survey real quick. Stop me if you find typos and stuff, or we could talk a little bit about it later on. But okay, so a little IDing. So how would you describe your primary role with respect to data or using data? Analyst, scientist slash statistician, somewhere on the engineering coding spectrum, or someone who manages and reads and writes reports? Are you primarily a data producer or consumer, or both? Consumers we define here as mostly downloading others' data and using it by themselves or within their teams. Publishers publish data sets or republish those that they care about. And then there's obviously shades of both. So are you mostly a publisher? Are you mostly downloading and using, or about even? What kind of data do you typically work with? Exclusively private. So either yours or your company's or your baseball team's data. A mix of public and private. A version of which will eventually be private. So taking census data and mixing it in with your customer data and coming up with an answer to a question you've been hired to solve. Or a mix of public and private, a version of which will eventually be public. Or exclusively public and open data, or other. You can tell us what you think about that. In general, how likely are you to share your data or work with the world by publishing it? So no, yes, everything in between, and it depends on what. And I think we have a pretty good sense often on what that depends on, but we want to learn from folks about that. Top of mind is sort of, I deal with the Department of Education data. I need to scrub it for a certain thing, and I can't publish it in its current state. Or there's a lot of work that I do to have before I can feel confident publishing a data set, and I don't necessarily want my brushstrokes shown to the world. So I need to maintain a private version for a long time, but eventually I'll publish some version of that. I'd love to know how that goes. When it comes to collaboration, which, if any, are the biggest problems for you? So this is kind of mixing a couple survey methodologies. We don't really rank these. We don't really put a pie chart of the amount of pain, but in general, just check for us which ones are important to you. So these are questions that Chris might recognize from conversations he and I led. But you needing to know what changed between versions of the same data. The second is access. I can't easily access the data I need without the help of another. Third, it's a problem knowing which version of the data is the latest, or what changed, the latest version since I saw or used it. Fourth, I spend a lot of time documenting my work or struggle with others' work that's not sufficiently documented. 5, it's a validation and trust problem. I spend a lot of time validating data and researching errors. That should be 1 period. Manual manipulation. I spend a lot of time manually copying, combining, and transforming data. And other. Roughly how many people touch, and by touch we mean edit, clean, or move a typical data set in your workflow, somewhere between just yourself and maybe 10 more. And if it depends, then on what. And then this one's kind of query specific. Which features of query, assuming you're familiar with what our tech offers are most interesting or important to you. Diffing, a summary report showing how one data set changed from one version to the next. Versioning / commit history, so notes that accompany each new version. Binding code and data via transform scripts. Discovering interesting and useful data sets from the network. Private data, the ability to manage data sets on query without making them public. Attribution or trust, so confidence in knowing a data set is what it says it is, or the ability to kind of quickly judge the quality of someone publishing data or their reputation. You know, this is a data set published by Johns Hopkins. If I find it under our Gardaphase query account, what can you do for me to have me believe that that's a Johns Hopkins data set? How do you sort out problems or errors with data? Check any that apply. I reach out to the authors and ask for clarifications. I make my own corrected copy. I record documents that describe our data and how to use it. And there's an other here because obviously there's millions of ways. And I think I wanted to leave that open. And I think there's only a couple more. Yeah. So how do you collaborate on data currently? Either via email or Dropbox files with like V2, V3, V4. All my data comes from somebody else, is prepared by a machine or ETL pipeline. Only one person edits or works on data at a time. So kind of work around collaboration by just letting someone take the pen. Querying a data set for the database for the latest. I think this is very common inside companies, at least the ones we talk to. Using version control, like Git or anything else that's out there. Or kind of a little bit more fast and loose collaboration tools in spreadsheet forms like Google Sheets, Airtable, and others. And then among those, I would love, just an open question about what the biggest shortcomings are of what's out there today. And then we kind of end with, tell us a line or two about what interested you in query or what you'd like us to focus on. So just kind of asking them to tell us what they want out of a tool like ours. So that's it. There are some sort of limitations to what MailChimp lets you send out, which is why some of these questions aren't like rank 1 through 10 or sort these or things like that. But that's kind of our first effort at a public version of kind of the conversations that Kurt and I led in the fall and Chris and I led over the winter with open data users about the problems that they're having. I can share again if anyone has like questions about it. I'll also link to it in our chat and like I said in the video description. Thank you very much, Rusty, too, for spot checking this late last week or middle of last week, and improving some of the wording on the questions and clarifying some points and making sure we're trying to get answers to the questions that are worth answering in such a brief first stab at a survey.
I think the only thing I see still is you got overlaps in the number of people who are using it.
Oh, yeah.
That's the only thing I see still.
Yeah, I remember that. I didn't think it was that big of a problem at the time, but
if you have 2, which do you answer? Or if you have 10, which do you answer?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, okay, I could fix that. Any other early feedback?
So this is still not out, right?
It's live.
Oh, okay. So anyways, I just wanted to add like two small comments, like things that I think might fit to the existing like survey. So first was like profiles. I think there's one more category that makes sense, and that's kind of like ops people. So those who almost exclusively manage the like infrastructure side of data. I think they are a big category that generally don't work on the data, but generally work with the data itself. So they have to manage like all of the stuff that that's floating around. And second to that, on the like issues panel, like what are your biggest problems with managing data and stuff like that. I think access and permissions might be one of those. I know we do have them kind of like in our scope. So I think that's also a good addition to just get some feedback on those as well.
All right, cool. We do, for your second point.
So access did trigger me, but it's mostly like how do you get to data and stuff like that. But I was mostly targeting like role-based access control and that stuff.
Okay, cool. The only wording we have to that effect is one of your problems that you can't easily access the data you need without another person.
Yeah, so I wasn't. So I was more targeting like you have a data set which has I don't know, sensitive data. For example, you're working at a bank and they're working with data sets. You want to redact, I don't know, specific columns or stuff like that, like users' real names or phone numbers, and then they work on the rest of the body or data set. So that's kind of like in the
Cool.
In the direction, yeah, of like role-based access on row level or column level or stuff like that.
Great. And then to your first point, do you think that profile is not included, or should, like you said, between data engineering coding, there's another level of like data ops?
Yeah, so those who literally don't wrangle the data, but just manage the infrastructure. One of the reasons I'm saying that is mostly query can actually solve some problems some people have, because it allows you to have like a central registry which houses your data, yada, yada, yada. So like for small to medium-sized data sets in a given company, they don't really have to manage a large infrastructure for their data and providing all the fancy tooling around it. They can just give you a query and there you go.
Yeah, perfect. All right, cool. I will add that as a role.
I don't know what a data engineer means there, but are you talking maybe basically like a database admin for static data, Asmir? Controlling access to it, storing it, and controlling versions. That's the job that you're talking about.
So kinda, there's the whole layer about managing large infrastructure. So when you get into large data sets, you need like heavy lifting databases, provisioning all the resources, managing like access to those buckets or wherever you're storing data and stuff like that. One like nitpick on the whole data kind of profile of people. I still think that's a very new category of people, and usually they had just different labels in previous lives.
Totally.
And I was also like a data engineer for a while, and it just means like you're kind of like sitting in between ops and like data science or analytics, and yeah, you try to glue everything together and then wrangle some data as well. So yeah, it's a fuzzy definition. So generally, I'm fine. Like whoever like sees themselves in this, I think they can just check the other box and like drop their like definition or description of what they are and what they do with data.
Maybe I'll turn this into a check any that apply. I don't know if that's dangerous, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people who are like, I go get my own data and then I clean it and I write reports. I mean, there's no yeah.
It's a funny
There's
world.
no end to the combinations of
Yeah.
skills that people have to bring to it. All right, cool. Well, I can bookend this by just saying that this survey is live and we're going to be promoting it, and hopefully those of you who watch this video will take an interest in that. Give us some answers. Oh, I should have asked one of you guys to screenshot. Anyway. All right, cool. Anything else? Like we said on our kind of coordinating call this morning, we can make this lean and short call, but all right, cool. Let's leave it there. Thank you all, and tune in again for Building Query this coming Friday, the end of Sprint L, I suppose. All right, cool. Till then,
You guys.
peace.
Yeah.